What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be doing a full breakdown of all of the pistols in XDefiant, putting them side by side to see which ones are best in various situations. Now this is something I've already done with the assault rifles and SMGs in this game, and the reason I decided to move on to pistols next is you're always going to have a pistol on your class setup, and therefore it is of course important to know which one of these will suit you best. So without further ado, let's dive into our range and time to kill comparison with these pistols, and the first thing to point out here is you might notice there appears to be a hard cap on the range values here. Like the 686 Magnum only goes up to 60 meters, and then the rest of the pistols only go up to 50 meters. And what this means is beyond those ranges, you literally can't deal damage to enemy players. Your bullet disappears the moment it hits that range. So that is a key thing to point out with pistols. They are literally useless beyond those ranges. And then another interesting thing to point out is all of the pistols have the exact same maximum damage range at just 10 meters. Now, when it comes to our time to kill potentials, the fastest killing pistol up close is actually the 93R, which is the burst pistol at 445 milliseconds, followed by the M1911 at 511 milliseconds, and then we've got the D50 and M9 tied at 600 milliseconds, and then finally we have the 686 Magnum, which is the slowest up close at 800 milliseconds, but it's also the most consistent as it's a 3-shot kill to the body at any range versus non-phantom enemies that have 100 health. And overall, looking at these time to kill values, they're not very competitive with most of the primary weapons in the game. On average with assault rifles, we're killing at about 400 milliseconds, SMGs are killing at about 345 milliseconds up close. So for the most part, pistols really aren't designed to be highly competitive against primary weapons in a 1v1 situation, which wasn't much of a surprise, although there are some games out there that like having their pistols to be far more competitive against primary weapons. That's just not the case in XDefiant. Now so far, that's just looking at body shots though, and it turns out pistols get excellent headshot multipliers. So let's have a look at our range and time to kill if we're mixing headshots in, and as you can see, the first thing that caught my eye is most of the pistols at most ranges only need one headshot mixed in with body shots to reduce the number of shots to kill. So that means with the 686 Magnum and the D50 for instance, all you need is one headshot and one body shot up close, and you'll end up with a 2-shot kill, and now your time to kill potential is far more competitive with those primary weapons. So there's definitely potential there by mixing headshots in. Additionally, I want to point out the 686 Magnum's headshot multiplier is so solid at 2 that against 100 health enemies, it actually only takes you one headshot mixed in with a body shot at any range where it's capable of hitting an enemy at least in order to get a 2-shot kill. So with most primary weapons, headshots are good but not necessary. In the case of pistols, headshots are really good in XDefiant, and if you're capable, you definitely want to try to mix those in, because if you do, you can now sometimes hold your own against primary weapons. Now, moving on, let's have a look at one more range and time to kill comparison. This time, I wanted to take a look at the pistols against phantom users with 120 health. And with this chart, just to make it a little easier to read, anytime you see the time to kill in red, this means it's going to be taking you at least one extra shot to kill within that damage range against a phantom user compared to a non-phantom user. Whereas if that time to kill value is still white, that means it's going to take you the same number of shots to kill. And this means for the 686 Magnum, the M1911, and the D50, in most situations where you'd be using a pistol, it's going to take you the same number of shots to kill versus phantom users. And therefore, if you do run up against a team that has a lot of phantom users on it, these are the 3 pistols I would recommend focusing on the most. It's also worth noting the 93R does the worst against phantom users. So much so that I would avoid using that pistol if you're playing against a bunch of phantoms. So there we go, that's going to wrap it up for all of our range and time to kill comparisons with the pistols. Next, let's talk about recoil a little bit. And when it comes to this, none of the pistols really have a ton of recoil, and when we look at our side-by-side comparison here, they all kick pretty much just straight upwards. Some of them have a very slight lean to the right as well, but that's practically negligible, I would say. And honestly, I don't have too much to say about the recoil when it comes to these guns, since they're all so consistent and quite accurate. I guess there is one note I will make, and this is with the D50. There is a fair amount of visual recoil with this gun, so it might look like it's kicking far more than it actually is. And as a result, that's one of the guns where you just kind of have to trust the fact that it's not kicking nearly as bad as it seems, and you just got to keep spamming it while keeping your target centered on your screen. So that's recoil out of the way. Next, let's get into our handling stats. And the handling stats are quite basic with the pistols. They're all identical in the aim down sight department at 150 milliseconds. And it's the exact same story with our sprint out time. Every one of the pistols in the game has a sprint out time of 150 milliseconds as well, which, by the way, those values are very fast when compared to primary weapons, as expected, of course. Then let's have a look at our default magazine capacity, and we can see the 680 is going to be the worst. It has a 6-round cylinder. Then the M1911 and the D50 are second worst at just 7 rounds. And then finally, the 93R and M9, both of these have a 15-round magazine capacity by default. And then finally, for this handling section, let's have a look at our reload add time. And just a brief explanation again, this reload time excludes any unnecessary animations. So it's from the moment you start your reload to the moment that the ammo appears in your gun on the bottom right, and any animation after that can be canceled out. It's unnecessary. So this is our true reload potential. And when we compare these, all of the pistols aside from the 680 Magnum reload very, very quickly at roughly 1.15 to 1.19 seconds. That's a very, very fast reload. However, the 680 Magnum is quite slow at 2.3 seconds. So that is one of the big downsides to using the 680 Magnum. You can't increase your cylinder capacity, and your reload time just isn't great. Now, something else I was curious about, especially with pistols when it comes to our handling stats, is our swap speed. How quickly can you pull a pistol out from a primary weapon? And I was kind of expecting to see some differences between these pistols, but it turns out, based on my testing, they're all identical. It's going to take you just over 400 milliseconds to swap from a sniper rifle over to any one of these pistols. And since there's no difference, there's no need for a comparison here. As for the next section I want to look at, this is our mobility stats, and this is going to be quite important because if you are planning on traveling a long distance, you definitely want to be swapping to your pistol since you're able to get around the map significantly faster with a pistol in your hand in XDefiant. But let's first compare our base movement speed. So this is our movement speed when we're not sprinting, but we are standing and walking at full speed. And we can see here both the 680 Magnum and the D50 are the slowest of the pistols at 4.7 meters per second, whereas the rest have a base movement speed of 4.85 meters per second. And we're going to see this same trend continue. With our sprint speed, we just multiply by 1.5 to get our sprint speed. And therefore, again, the 680 Magnum and the D50 are going to be the slowest out of the pistols at 7.05 meters per second. However, this is still going to be faster than any of the primary guns in the game by a noticeable margin. So it's still going to be in your best interest to swap to those pistols if you're sprinting any sort of distance and don't anticipate you're going to run into an enemy right away. And then finally, our aim walking speed is just a 0.7 multiplier from the base. And therefore, again, the D50 and the 680 Magnum will be the slowest out of the pistols, but we still have that same trend where you're still able to aim down sight and move faster than any of the primary guns in the game, at least when we're talking about no attachments. And these strafe speeds are actually quite solid, so if you are in a gunfight with a pistol, it's absolutely in your best interest to try to strafe back and forth as quickly as possible to throw off your enemy's aim and maybe give yourself a little bit of extra time to win that gunfight. And with that, that will wrap it up for the primary comparison I wanted to make with all of the pistols in the game. However, there's one last brief note I want to make here, and this is something I touched on in my video where I covered the cleaner's burn damage. But I do think it's important to mention in this video since there are two pistols in particular that benefit quite heavily if you're using the cleaner's faction. And these are the 686 Magnum and the D50. With both of these, you're going to see some very nice improvements. Like with the 686 Magnum, for instance, you can actually get a one-shot kill to the head with that bonus burn damage applying after the fact, as long as it's against a 100 HP enemy, and it's not a Libertad user that's in the process of healing. And then another thing with the 686 Magnum and the D50 is up close, both of them are going to be a 2-shot kill rather than a 3-shot kill against a 100 HP enemy. Again, also assuming it's not a Libertad user that is currently healing as you're firing those 2 shots. So just a little bonus there that I wanted to tag on. If you are using cleaners, definitely make sure you're using one of these 2 pistols since they benefit very heavily from that faction. And with that, that is finally going to wrap it up for the breakdown on all of the pistols in XDefiant. As for my thoughts on these and which ones I think are best, honestly, I think a lot of this comes down to personal preference, but my personal favorites would be the D50 as an all-arounder, the 93R as a nice, like really close range one. So if I'm using SMGs, for instance, and I'm really getting myself close quarters, I quite like the 93R unless I'm playing against a bunch of Phantom users. And then finally, I do like the 686 Magnum as well, just due to the fact that it's got a very consistent 3-shot kill at any range where you're capable of hitting your target, and headshots are very powerful with that gun as well. Unfortunately, when it comes to the M1911 and the M9 though, I'm just not a big fan of these pistols. I don't think there's really much about these that makes them stand out really heavily compared to the others, and while they're perfectly fine and usable, I just don't think they're great relative to the other pistols in the game. Now, of course, these are just my opinions, and I'd love to hear what you guys think in those comments down below. Out of all the pistols in XDefiant, which ones do you tend to lean toward? Also, if you guys haven't seen the episodes yet on the SMGs as well as assault rifles where I covered them in a very similar way, I will leave a link to both of those in the description of the video. If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.